This setup video is specially designed for those who prefer using a Raspberry Pi CM4 instead of the default CB1 MCU provided in the Siboor kit. I had quite a journey with the default CB1 MCU. It was unreliable and often left my Voron Trident printer non-functional, causing a big delay in uploading this final setup video. As a final resort, I decided to switch to a Raspberry Pi CM4, and honestly, it's been a game changer. The first step is to carefully remove the default CB1 and replace it with the Raspberry Pi CM4. Take your time, no rush. Before you begin, always double-check that the power is off. Safety first. By following along with this video, you'll be well on your way to a successful setup. Trust the process. It works. We're diving into the Big Tritech Manta M8P V2.0 user manual to guide us step by step. Let's make this setup as smooth as possible. Once the installation is done, you're all set. Next, connect your computer to the M8P with the CM4 attached using a trusty USB-C cable. Let's bridge the gap. A quick tip. I recommend using USB-C on your computer too. Insufficient power can sometimes lead to the CM4's eMMC being unrecognized. No one likes a sleepy connection. Next, turn on dip switches 3 and 4 to boot the motherboard into boot mode. These switches are pretty tiny, so grab something fine-tipped for precision. Steady hands win the day. Next, power on your Voron Trident. My power button is relocated to the front for convenience, but for most setups, you'll find it near the power cord at the back. A little scavenger hunt, perhaps? Next, click the link provided in the manual to download and run RPI boot. You might see some pop-up windows along the way, but just ignore them. They're not important. After a little wait, your Raspberry Pi will show up as a drive on your computer. Easy, right? Next up, download and install Raspberry Pi Imager on your computer. The manual conveniently includes the link, so no need to go searching. It's all right there. After connecting your computer to the M8P via USB-C, launch the Raspberry Pi Imager. In the device selection menu, choose Pi4. For the OS, navigate to Other Specific Purpose OS, then 3D Printing, and finally select Mainsail OS. It's like picking the perfect toppings for your 3D printing adventure. Now it's time to select your storage. If the CM4 doesn't appear in the list, don't panic. Just rerun the RPI boot software. Sometimes a little nudge is all it needs. Once you've selected the storage, click Edit Settings. For the hostname, Raspberry Pi works great. For the username, go with Pi, and for the password, Raspberry is a safe bet. And hey, if you ever forget these, just come back and rewatch this video. It's your backup plan. Next, select the storage. Don't forget to set up your Wi-Fi and time zone here. It'll save you from later frustration of digging through files and entering details manually. Work smarter, not harder. SSH should be enabled by default, but it's always a good idea to double-check. Better safe than sorry. All set with the configuration. Now click Yes to move forward with the installation. Let's get this done. Here's what the installation screen looks like. Pretty straightforward, right? During the installation, you might see a format warning on your computer screen. Resist the urge to touch it. If you absolutely can't wait, cautiously click Cancel. But whatever you do, don't hit Format. Trust me, you don't want to go there. Once the writing is complete, you'll see a completion message in Raspberry Pi Imager. At this point, go ahead and turn off the power. Unplug the USB cable as well. Next, switch dip switches 3 and 4 back to off. and power it back on again. A quick reboot to get things ready. The first boot might take a little longer than usual, so be patient. You won't see the Klipper screen yet, that comes later, but don't worry, just let it run until the screen stabilizes. Good things take time. Now, turn the power off once again and switch it back on. Do you notice any changes during the boot up? That's it. The initial installation is complete. Next, let's shift gears and confirm if SSH is working and if you can access the mainsail dashboard from your browser. Let's dive in. Open your browser and type raspberrypi.local into the URL bar. Voila! The mainsail dashboard should appear. If it doesn't connect, the most common culprit is that your PC and 3D printer aren't on the same Wi-Fi network. I've been there. My PC was on my home Wi-Fi, and my 3D printer was using my phone's hotspot. Let's just say it was a humbling moment. Next, let's check the SSH connection. I'm using Mobax's term, but feel free to use any SSH client you prefer. Just enter raspberrypi.local as the remote host, and you're good to go. For login, enter Pi set in the Raspberry Pi imager. And there we have it. The SSH connection is up and running. Now type LSUSB and press enter. From the current output of LSUSB, it appears that the USB devices connected to the M8P board and CM4 are recognized correctly. The next configuration item is, technically you can type LSUSB in the SSH screen, and everything seems to connect just fine. However, I'll stick to the M8P manual and add dtoverlay dwc2 dar mode host to the config.txt file. Even if it's redundant, it won't cause any harm. Better safe than sorry, right? Now, in the terminal screen accessed via SSH in Mobax's term, type sudo nano.boot config.txt and hit enter. When asked for a password, type Raspberry. It will not be displayed, but press enter. This will open the config.txt file for editing. Scroll to the end of the config.txt file, just below all, and type dtoverlay.dwc2 dr mode host. Of course, copying and pasting it directly from the manual is perfectly fine. Once you've finished typing, press Ctrl+X to save and exit. Easy, right? When prompted to save, type Y for yes and press enter to confirm. Easy as that. After saving, if you don't return to the terminal screen, just press enter again. That will bring you back to where you need to be. With Mainsail OS, Klipper, and Moonraker now installed, the setup on the Raspberry Pi is complete. There's still more to do, but let's take a well-deserved break for now. You've earned it. We'll start by updating Mainsail, Klipper, and Moonraker to their latest versions. And we'll also install KlipperScreen. There are a few ways to do this, but today we'll use a tool called kiauh. It makes everything so much easier. Let's get started. Open Mobax's term and establish an SSH connection. Log in using PI, and then copy the installation command from the kiauh GitHub page. Paste it into the terminal to install kiauh. It's that simple. Enter Raspberry when prompted for a password. While we're installing, let me give you a quick and fun explanation of how Klipper works. Think of it like this. Mainsail is the head office of a not-so-great company, sitting on its fancy chair. the Raspberry Pi. Then there's Klipper, the overbearing boss who's constantly barking orders at its subordinate, the M8P motherboard. Now, M8P, being the middle manager, doesn't do all the work itself. It passes some tasks to its assistant, the EBB board, with a sharp, "Hey, you handle this." And finally, the real unsung heroes, the regular employees, the motors, heaters, and fans, are the ones actually getting the job done, sweating away to make the whole thing work. All right, the installation is done, so I'll stop boring you with my stories. Let's move on to the next step. Once Git is installed, go to the kiauh GitHub homepage and copy the command provided. Paste it into the terminal to download kiauh to your home directory. Easy as that. Let's go ahead and run kiauh. I've already copied and pasted the command, so let's see it in action. You'll see a prompt asking if you want to try kiauh version 6. Since there are still some bugs and we'll update Python later, let's select No for now. But if you're interested in providing feedback, feel free to give version 6 a try. First, let's choose installation number 1 and put Klipper screen. When prompted for a password, type Raspberry and enter. Then let's select number 5 Klipper screen, the beginning of a slightly longer installation. Don't forget to enter. During the installation, you'll need to choose between standalone mode or desktop app mode. Since we want the Raspberry Pi to act as a dedicated device for the 3D printer and to automatically launch Klipper screen at startup, type Y for yes and hit enter. Next, you'll need to choose a graphical backend, Xserver or Wayland. We'll go with Xserver since it's more stable. Just type X and press enter. However, for setups other than Siboor Voron Trident, if your display supports KMS DRM drivers, you might want to give Wayland a try. It could be an interesting option. Finally, you'll be prompted to install the Network Manager. Of course, type Y for yes and press enter. With this, you'll be able to manage your network directly from Klipper screen. Super convenient, right? It might look like it stopped halfway, but don't worry. Klipper screen installation is complete. Did your screen return to the kiauh menu properly? If so, great. Now let's check the main unit and see how it's running. Everything is displaying properly. Looks like we've succeeded. Before we move on, it seems the SSH connection has dropped. Let's use Klipper screen to reconnect to Wi-Fi and get back on track. First, open the network menu. Select the same Wi-Fi network as your computer and enter the password. Once that's done, return to Mobix term and reconnect via SSH. Let's get back on track. Log in again using Pi and let's launch kiauh. Copy and paste the command from GitHub. Avoid version 6 and choose No number 2. As you can see, Klipper screen is successfully installed. Great work. And now, for the final step in this process, updating. From the kiauh main menu, select To Update and hit Enter. It might take a while, so sit back and let it do its thing. If you're asked for a password when selecting to update, just type Raspberry and hit enter. As I've said before, this is the default password, so keep it handy. You've now entered the update menu. While it's possible to update each item one by one, let's save time by selecting A, update all to complete everything at once. Simply type A and hit enter. Easy and efficient. You'll see another message asking if you want to update the listed items. Simply type Y for yes and hit enter to proceed. Let's keep it moving. The update process will take about 6 minutes, so sit back and relax for a bit. Once it's done, we'll move on to updating through the mainsail dashboard. Next, in your browser's URL bar, type Raspberry Pi local. And remember, it's Pi here, not just Raspberry. After all the password entries, it's easy to mix them up, so don't forget. It's Raspberry Pi local. In the dashboard, click the menu in the top left corner and select Machine. Then, navigate to the Update Manager and click Update. Typically, you'll see updates for Crow's Nest and Mainsail config here. However, since I already updated Crow's Nest earlier, my screen won't reflect the usual steps, so don't use it as a reference. In this demonstration, I'll update the items individually, but normally you'd find an Update All button at the bottom for a quicker update process. A warning might pop up saying, "Are you sure you want to update with risks?" It sounds a bit scary, but don't worry. Just check the box and proceed with the update. I'm not an expert on this, so I can't say for sure, but is it possible to do all updates here without using kiauh? If anyone knows the answer, please let me know in the comments. All right, everything's ready to go. It's been a long road, but we've finally arrived at the highlight of this video, CAN BUS connection. Let's take a moment to thank the trailblazers whose guides we'll be following. They've done the hard thinking so we can hopefully avoid the headaches. First, we'll verify that the system network service is enabled. To do this, simply copy and paste the commands provided on the guide's homepage. Easy and straightforward. Enter PI to log in. Copy sudo systemctl enable systemd networked and stick it in the terminal. Enter Raspberry when prompted for a password. Next, we'll start the service using sudo systemctl start system networked. Pressing enter doesn't change it, but that's okay. Then, to ensure it's running properly, use systemctl grep system networked. Simple steps to verify everything is working as expected. If the message loaded active running is displayed, it is okay. Next, let's configure the TXQLN for the interface. For simplicity, just copy and paste the commands provided. It's the easiest way to proceed. Enter Raspberry when prompted for a password. To confirm that the settings were applied correctly, use the command cat etc udev cha rules.d10can.rules. As always, feel free to copy and paste the command for simplicity. See if the results on your screen look similar to what's shown here. Congratulations, you've succeeded. Finally, let's enable the kiauh interface and set its speed. To verify the settings, copy and paste the provided command. If the results on your screen match, the configuration has been applied correctly. And to wrap things up, let's reboot the system for all changes to take effect. The reboot command can also be copied directly from the homepage. Simple and convenient. According to the CAN BUS guide, there are a few things to verify before moving on. Check if the termination resistors are attached to the main board and toolhead and ensure all cables are properly connected. Since this video assumes the Voron Trident kit has already been assembled, if you're working on a different machine, make sure to complete these checks before proceeding. Before proceeding, we need to install some dependencies. Simply copy and paste the commands provided on the guide's homepage and run them. It's straightforward and gets the job done. After completing the update, the next step is to install Katapult. Simply copy and paste the command from the Canvas guide, which conveniently handles both installation and updating in one go. The next step is to compile and flash Katapult onto the mainboard. For the Voron Trident, the mainboard is the Big Tree Tech Manta M8P V2.0. Here, you'll need to adjust the settings to match your specific board. The guide provides links to screenshots for each board configuration, so make sure to refer to them for your setup. For the Voron Trident, the main board you're working with is the Manta M8P V2.0. Use this Katapult config setting. Press Q to exit the menu. When asked if you want to save your changes, select Yes to confirm. To wrap things up, use Make to compile. With that, katapult.bin has been successfully generated in and katapult out katapult.bin, ready to move on. To flash the firmware after compiling, set your mainboard to DFU boot mode. For the M8P V2, hold down the boot 0 button, press and release the reset button, then count to 5 and release boot 0. It's that simple. To confirm that the board is in DFU mode, simply run the lsusb command. If you see an entry for ST Microelectronics STM device in DFU mode, you're good to go. Now to flash the Katapult firmware onto the mainboard, simply use the command provided on the homepage. Copy, paste, and execute. It's as easy as that. Although the Canvas guide doesn't mention this, double-check the USB address shown in lsusb. The DFU mode address 0483.ef11 should match the end of the command. If you're using the M8P board for Voron Trident, you likely won't need to make any changes. Press Enter to execute the command. If prompted for a password, type Raspberry and press Enter again to proceed. If you see an error like Error during download get status, don't worry. As long as you see File downloaded successfully above it, the flash was successful, and you can safely ignore the error. Katapult should now be successfully flashed. For the Voron Trident M8P mainboard, you only need to double-click the reset button. No extra steps required. However, if you're using a different mainboard, you might need to remove the DFU jumpers first. To verify that the board is in Katapult mode, simply copy and paste the command from the Canvas guide homepage and run it. You should see a USB Katapult device listed. If it doesn't show up, double-click the reset button on your board and run ls dev serial by ID again to check. And with that, Katapult is officially installed on the mainboard. While making this video, I couldn't help but think it might actually be easier for you to just follow the Canvas guide directly. Laughs. But hey, where's the fun in that? Next, we're diving into the USB CANBridge Klipper installation. Let's keep going. Copy and run the command provided in the Canvas guide. After that, move to the Klipper directory on your Pi to proceed. To access the Klipper configuration menu, run Make Menu Config. You can simply copy this command from the Canvas guide for ease. Check the Canvas guide for the M8P Klipper configuration. Follow along and set the values to match the guide exactly. The Canvas guide page will be easier to read than referring to the video for settings. After completing the firmware configuration, press Q to exit. When prompted to save the settings, type Y for yes and hit Enter to confirm. You might notice that the bootloader settings differ slightly from what's shown in the Canvas guide. However, I've personally verified that it works perfectly fine even without SKRSE at the end. So, just follow along and select 128 KB bootloader as shown in the video. Once you've finished configuring the firmware, run make clean to clear out any old files. After that, simply run make to compile the firmware. I'm copying and pasting make clean, but honestly, it's probably quicker to just type it out. Laughs. Hey, we all have our habits, right? After compiling, it's time to flash Klipper using katapult. Simply copy and paste the command from the Canvas guide and run it. Then, stop the Klipper service on your Pi to proceed. Runnels, dev to serial by ID, and take note of the katapult device that appears. As always, you can simply copy this command from the guide for convenience. Next, you'll enter the command to install the firmware. Simply copy it from the Canvas guide, but make sure to replace the last part with the katapult device ID you noted earlier. Don't skip this step. I tried copying and pasting the ID in the terminal, but it didn't work, so I'm manually typing it after katapult. Once you've entered the ID, just press Enter to run the command. At this point, the Klipper firmware should be successfully installed on your mainboard. To confirm, run lsusb. You should see a Geschwister Schneider CAN adapter or something similar listed. Next, let's run IPSD-link show CAN to check if the CAN 0 interface is up and running. It's a simple way to confirm everything's working as expected. When you check the CAN 0 interface, you'll notice that the EQ-len is set to 128 and the bitrate is $1,000. That's exactly what we want to see. Finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, running the Klipper CAN BUS query. Now you can retrieve the CAN BUS UUID of your mainboard. Let's make it happen. Copy and paste from the Canvas guide site and run it. This UUID will be used in the MCU section of your Printer.cfg file, so don't forget to record it for future use. Here's an important note. If your Voron Trident is fully assembled and all connections are in place, you might see 3 UUIDs. While you could manually swap the UUIDs in the MCU, MCU EBB CAN, and scanner sections of Printer.cfg, it's easier to unplug the toolhead or the CAN communication connector on the mainboard. Then, run the UUID query again to clearly identify the correct MCU UUID. Finally, enter sudo service klipper start to restart the Klipper service. No need to type it manually. You can just copy and paste it from the Canvas guide. The next step is flashing the toolhead board. If you've successfully completed everything up to this point, repeating these steps will be simple and straightforward. The Canvas guide includes a step to clone the katapult repository to your Pi again. However, since we already did this during the mainboard installation, it's perfectly fine to skip this step. That said, if you're starting fresh with the toolhead or just want to redo it, feel free to go ahead. Now, Let's configure the katapult firmware for the toolhead. Follow the Canvas guide to navigate to the katapult directory. Copy the firmware modification command, paste it into the terminal, and execute it. Let's get started. You'll need to adapt the instructions to fit your board's specific configuration. For reference, check out the Common Toolhead Hardware section in the Canvas guide to find screenshots of settings for popular toolheads. For the Voron Trident setup, make sure to check the BigTreeTech EBB SB2209 RP2040 section for guidance. Be sure to check the Canvas guide page for all the configuration details. After finishing the configuration, press Q on your keyboard to exit. When asked to save the changes, simply select Yes to confirm. After returning to the terminal, type Make and hit Enter to begin the compilation process. Let's get it done. During the compilation, keep in mind that the next steps may vary depending on the type of toolhead board. For this Siboor Voron Trident, we're working with the RP2040. If you're using a different board, simply follow the instructions in the Canvas guide. It should work perfectly. And please don't break my heart by saying, then why do we even need this video? Let's keep going. With the compilation done, it's time to flash katapult to the toolhead. To do this, we first need to set the toolhead board to DFU mode. First, turn off the 3D printer, then unplug any cables connected to the toolhead board. Next, grab a USB Type-C to Type-A cable. Connect the Type-C end to the toolhead board and the Type-A end to the main board. The power is on in the video, but it should still be off at this point. Next, attach a jumper to the USB 5V shorting pins on the toolhead board. Use the jumper included in the Voron Trident kit. If you can't find it, don't worry. Anything that can short the pins will do the trick. Once you've connected the main board and toolhead board and the USB 5V jumper is in place, power the 3D printer back on. After that, return to the terminal to continue. Now let's confirm whether the board is in DFU boot mode. Simply type LSUSB in the terminal and hit Enter to execute the command. If you see Raspberry Pi boot listed, congratulations, it's a success. Don't forget to jot down the device's address for later use. Next, we'll flash the katapult firmware to the toolhead board. Just copy and run the command from the Canvas guide page. For Voron Trident users, the address at the end of the command should already match, but it's always a good idea to double-check. Oh, one more thing. Don't forget to delete flash device after pasting the command. If you don't, you'll just end up with an error. When prompted for a password, type Raspberry and press Enter. If the flash is successful, your terminal should look something like this. When the flash is successful, the terminal will look like this. Just to reiterate, when copying the code, be sure to delete flash device app. Then, replace it with the boot mode address you obtained from LSUSB. I made this mistake and wasted a few days, so don't let it happen to you. Next, type sudo shutdown now and hit Enter to shut down the system. Once that's done, turn off the printer's power. When the screen indicates that the connection has been lost, turn off the 3D printer. After that, return the wiring you adjusted for DFU boot mode back to its original setup. Unplug the USB Type-C plugged into the toolhead board. Remove the USB 5V jumper. Disconnect USB Type-A on the main board side. Finally, connect the toolhead board connectors. Turn on the 3D printer. Once the 3D printer has fully booted, connect via SSH. Copy and run the command from the Canvas guide to check if the toolhead board is on the CAN network and waiting in katapult mode. When replacing the main board with a CM4 on the Voron Trident, you might see Klipper instead of katapult, as shown in the Canvas guide's new installation. Don't worry, this is normal. It's simply overwriting the existing firmware on the toolhead board. Make a note of this UUID and proceed to the next step. Next, it's time to install Klipper. Simply copy the command from the Canvas guide and navigate to the Klipper directory. Next, use Make Menu Config to access the Klipper configuration menu. As always, you can copy this command from the Canvas guide for convenience. This step is similar to what we did earlier. Refer to the Klipper settings for BigTreeTech SB2209 RP2040 in the Canvas guide for guidance. The Canvas guide highlights important points like attaching termination resistors and ensuring the CAN bus speed matches the main board. With the Siboor Voron Trident kit and the CM4 setup, you can skip the complex details and just copy and paste to get things done. After finishing the firmware configuration, run make clean to clear out old files. Then, execute make to compile the firmware. After the compilation is finished, the next step is to use katapult to flash Klipper. Copy the code from the Canvas guide and use it to stop Klipper. Since I'm working while creating this video, my connection keeps getting interrupted, so I'm asked for a password every time. But don't worry, once you enter it the first time, you shouldn't have to deal with this hassle. Next, follow the Canvas guide to check the UUID again. If you forgot to note it down during the katapult flash, don't worry. You can confirm it here once more. Copy the command from the Canvas guide to display the UUID. However, in the case of the Voron Trident kit, it overwrites an existing installation, so the output might look a bit different from what's shown in the guide. If 3 UUIDs show up and you're unsure which is which, unplug the cartographer connector and run the command again. With only 2 UUIDs left, the non-mainboard one is for the toolhead board. Now, make a note of the toolhead board's UUID EBB CAN, and let's move on to installing Klipper. Replace the UUID part in the command you copied from the Canvas guide with the UUID you obtained, and then run it. Once the flash is complete, run the UUID display command again. In a new installation, you'd see a change from Application, Katapult to Application, Klipper. But with the Voron Trident kit, there's no visible change. Let's check if it's properly recognized by Klipper. Simply copy the command from the Canvas guide and run it. Everything is recognized properly. Now let's start Klipper. Just copy the command from the Canvas guide and execute it. Well done. The final step is to input the UUID into your Printer.cfg file, and that's it. You're all set. Next time, in the Breaking the Cartographer edition, I'll show you how to reflash the firmware and switch from scan mode to touch mode. If you're the type who doesn't tinker unnecessarily, you won't need this video. But for those still struggling with errors and saying, I swear I didn't touch anything and it broke, this one's for you. Be sure to subscribe and look forward to the next video.